Hi everyone, welcome to Eve Math Tutoring. Today's lesson is on absolute values. Now, what is an absolute value? So the absolute value of a number is the magnitude of that number. Okay, so let's start with that first. And when we say the magnitude of a number, what we mean is how the magnitude of a number is how far that number is away from zero on the number line. Okay, so how far that number is away from zero on the number line. Or we could also say the distance of a number, distance of a number from zero. Okay, so if we actually drew that on a number line, so 0 is in the center, and if we put positives here, and we put negatives here, oops, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. If I wanted to know the absolute value of, say, 3, well, I would go, okay, 3's here, and here's 0, so 3 is how far away from 0? Well, it's 1, 2, 3 units away, so the answer would be 3. Now, what if I want to look at -3? So the absolute -3. Now these, sorry, I should have mentioned this already, but these straight lines in mathematics always represent absolute values, okay? So whenever you see straight bars around a number, that's asking you to find the absolute value of that number, okay? So that's important to remember as well. And that's always the case, it never changes, okay? So these lines in mathematics, straight bars, represent absolute value. Now, if we're looking at the absolute value of -3, how far is -3 from 0? Well, again, it's actually, now positive 3 is 3 away. Okay, so the absolute of 3 was equal to 3. However, -3, the absolute of -3 is still positive 3 because it's still 3 units away from 0. The absolute of a number is asking you, it's not asking you the value of the number, it's asking you the magnitude of that number. So it's asking you the distance of that number from 0. How far is that number away from 0? It's 3 units away from 0, okay? The closer you are to 0, the closer the number, the value you're looking at, the absolute value is to 0, the smaller it would be. So if I wanted the absolute value of, 1, it would just be 1. Or if I wanted the value of -1.5, I would see how far away it is from 0. So it's still 1.5 units. So the answer would still be positive. Okay, so that's kind of important to remember. So the absolute value is asking you the magnitude of a number, or a better way to remember it is how far away is that number from 0. Okay, so let's see here. So when you have any number, you always get positive of that number. So say, let's let n represent a number. The absolute of n is always going to be positive n. And any negative number, if n is a number, let's let n represent a number in this situation, is still going to be positive of that number. So if I have absolute -5, the answer is positive 5. And this is always the case. So this is the rule, okay? This always holds with absolute values. Now, you might get examples where, so when you have just one number inside the absolute value, it's easy to figure out the answer. However, sometimes you'll get questions that ask you, multi-step situations. For example, you could get something like, what's the absolute of 3 minus 7? Now, in this case, the trick here is you have to think of the absolute values as brackets. So if these were brackets, how would you solve the question? So you're going to do it the exact same way. Okay, so 3 minus 7 is just going to be, you're going to keep the absolute values and you're going to do what's inside. So it would be -4, and same thing if you were doing brackets. And then once you remove the brackets, or in this case the absolute values, you have to say what this becomes. Now, if this were brackets, this would just be -4, but in this case, it's an absolute. So the absolute of -4 is actually +4, okay? So that's where it's a little bit different. Okay, but what I'm trying to say is, you know how what you do is you simplify what's inside of brackets? Same thing with absolutes. Think of them as brackets until you just get to one number, and then once you just get one number inside the absolute, you can go ahead and solve it. Okay, I'm going to show you another example here. Say you had the example absolute of -4. Okay, well, first, what's the absolute of -4? It's 4, but then there's this negative in front, so I have to attach that. Okay, something like the following. -7 minus 21 minus 13 minus 19. So again, now this is very confusing. If you have absolutes here, you can't just, apply the absolute to the 7 and the -21. So that's incorrect. So like I said, think of them as brackets, okay? And how would you solve this question if these were brackets? Well, according to brackets, you always do what's inside the brackets, right? I mean, according to BEDMAS, we always do what's inside the brackets, and then we do the subtracting and the things outside of brackets. But first, we always deal with whatever's inside the brackets. So in this case, you're going to think of them as brackets, and you're going to do 7 minus 21 first, which is going to give us -14. And then over here, so put the minus in, and don't forget that negative there. And then 13 minus 19, which is going to be -6. Okay, keeping the absolute still. Now, once you get to the point where you have just one number inside absolute value, then you go into absolute mode. Okay, and you remember that you're dealing with absolute values, so that's very important too, because the absolute of a number, now this is, it's not going to give you the same as if it were just a bracket. So the absolute of any number is the positive of that number. So the absolute, once I remove the absolute signs, it becomes +14, and then that negative that was in front attaches there. And then here I can put the minus, and here I've got absolute of -6. The absolute value of any negative number is just positive of that number, so it's just 6, and that's the negative from there. Okay, and then you do -14 minus 20, which gives you -6, which gives you -20. Okay, so that's how you do questions that have more than one step. Okay. We can do a few more. Now let's try a few more examples. Let's try maybe something that has -12 minus 5 plus 8. Now what if you had something like this? Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to do what's inside the absolute values first. So you're going to do 12 minus 5, which would be 7, and then plus 8, which would be 15. And then once you have one number left inside the absolute value, you can go ahead and apply it. So the absolute of any number is just the positive of that number. Okay, let's do another example. Okay, so these are absolute values here. So again, here I'm going to do whatever is inside the absolutes first. So I can even write them in. Now 3 minus 9 is going to be -6. 5 minus 11 is going to be also -6. And 21 plus 4 is going to be 25. Okay, and then at that point, here, negative, okay. Now at this point, negative, so now we just remove the absolute values. So the negative just stays here. So the absolute of -6, I can even write it in brackets if that will make it clearer, becomes +6, and the absolute here becomes, again, +6, and this just becomes 25. So you can, if you want, go ahead and actually replace them after with brackets if you want, if that would make it easier to solve it. Okay, and then now -6 minus 6 is -12 plus 25. So that's just equal to +13. Okay, so that's how you would solve a question, you know, where you have more than one absolute. Here, I'll just try right here. This is another example, okay? So that's how you would solve a question that has more than one absolute value and has more values inside of the absolute value, more than one value, okay? Or in this step, I could have just not written in the brackets, but sometimes it makes it clear. So once you remove the absolutes, the actual absolute of -6 is just, you know, 6 with brackets. So then now you can go ahead and just solve it like a regular question, okay? So that's kind of how you solve absolute values. I'm going to do one more. Let's do -9 minus 23 minus -7 plus 5. Okay. Yeah, okay. So now in this case, I'm going to do what's inside first. So I'm going to write the absolutes in. So we're going to do 9 minus 23. So that's going to be -14. And then -7 plus 5 is going to be -2. Okay. So we did that first. Now the negative of -14 is just 14 minus, sorry, the absolute, I should say, absolute of -14 is 14, positive 14. And the absolute of -2 is positive 2. So then we get -14 minus 2. We can even write one more step here. And that becomes -16. Okay, so that's how you would solve something like that. Okay, so that's absolute values. So I hope that helped you understand how to solve absolute values. And if you have any other questions, if you have any other questions, you can email me at evemathtutoring@outlook.com. So if there are any other questions that are more, you know, complicated or complex that you have, you can just post them on the channel or just send me an email and ask me to post a video on them, and I'll gladly do that. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye.